Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight, and I'm really excited. I'm Mike Kenichi, and our guest tonight, you talk about one of the best filmmakers, authors, you name it. He does everything, and he's a credit to the business. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Michael Arbouet. And Michael, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor for me.
Thank you for having me on.
So, Michael, let me ask you this. I think it wasn't really till high school when you decided that you wanted to, be involved with film and producing and writing and things like that. It really didn't happen till you got to high school, correct?
Correct. I was in high school. My best friend at the time, his name was John Celentano. His dad had a video camera, and I was like, "What is this?" And he was like, "We use it for vacations." I'm like, "Can we use it?" And he was like, "As long as we don't break it." So that's when I really got interested into using video and filming stuff. And then I joined the drama club, which got me a little bit into acting, and that really got me. That had me bite the bug type of a thing, where I really liked filmmaking and thought that's what I wanted to do as a career. When I didn't know anybody who was into that field.
Right. Now, let me ask you, was there like ever a show, a movie, or anything that like caught your interest and you just loved the writing or you loved the acting and you said, this is something I may want to be interested in?
Well, everybody mentions Star Wars, of course, but my favorite film of all time has to be Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And that was the first time I was really introduced to Steven Spielberg. And just some of those shots blew me away. I don't know if you remember that scene where the French scientist is like, "Where did these noises come from?" And like 1,000 people point up, and all their hands fill the screen. I was like, "Oh, that's what I want to do. That's so cool."
Right. You talk about Steven Spielberg and, so many terrific writers, directors, and things like that. What was one of the things, Michael, when you were going to film school, that again, they can't teach you all the rules to the game, but what was the one thing that like you thought would be most challenging for you when you were in school?
Well, when I was in school, it was funny because it was the late '80s, early '90s, and I really thought, okay, if I go to school and I learn all the basics, that I'll just get into the industry. And what I ended up learning was that after graduating from film school, I decided to try to be the next Spielberg. I jumped on a plane. I went to California, and I found out that it really is about who you know, and trying to get into the industry in California without knowing anybody was impossible. So I ended up moving back to New York and getting into the film industry here. And within the early '90s and early 2000s, I ended up meeting a lot of people who made it in the industry.
Right. And when you graduated in 1993 and went back to New York, you interned at NBC for like a year, correct? And it doesn't get any better than that. Prestigious network, it was one of the big three for a long, long time. So just talk about that experience a little bit.
That was a great experience. My professor John Cushell helped me get the internship, and everything was kind of changing the industry. Like there wasn't a lot of people into television, so it was great to work on in NBC. And during my lunch break, I would go and watch them film Saturday Night Live. So that was fun because that was before 9/11. They didn't lock the door, and anybody could just walk in, sit down, and just watch them practice the show. So it was a really good experience because I learned all the technical aspects of television and filming, interning at NBC.
Right. And it wasn't too long after interning, Michael. You got your first paying job. You edited a film. I think it was called "The Girl in Watermelon,"
Mhm.
and you edited that film. So just talk about that because again, you have to kind of do different things when you're trying to get to the next level. So your first introduction was really editing, but it's important to have all the aspects of what goes into making a film, and editing is a very important part, as many people know.
Well, back then, when they filmed The Girl in the Watermelon, it was shot in Super 16 and they blew it up to 35 millimeter. So they were still working with actual film at that time. And I was interning actually as a sound editor. So my job was basically to sync up the picture and the sound together so the main editor can look at it on a machine, we call it Avid, and see if that scene worked, and then he would edit all the scenes together. So, I mean, they don't make film like this anymore. I actually had to relearn the process, but back then, it was working with film, not video, and it took like a couple months to actually edit a film.
Right. And, Michael, people don't realize, especially films, they they may take like 6 to 9 months to film. I mean, they take a long time. I remember when I had Matt Savito on from The Sopranos. He said like one episode sometimes took them over a month to shoot. So I mean, when you're doing movie type films, I mean, it's a long road, it's a long process. But I'm sure as you're doing it, you don't look at it as work because it's so much fun. Correct?
Well, yeah, it also depends on what you're working on, whether you're working on an independent film or you're working on a big budget film. Like when you're working on a big budget film, there are a lot of rules, through SAG and through other agencies. So a typical film will take you about 30 to 45 days to actually film it, and that's following the script and working with the cinematographer and the director. And once you have everything in the can, then it's months and months of editing and seeing if the shot works. And back then, when it was just film, we had to run all the dailies to do art just to see if what we filmed came out, whether it was in focus, whether the shot worked. So it was a long process. When we did the switch over to video, a lot of the old timers didn't like it, but around 2000, 2001, we switched over to video, and we had to kind of relearn the industry and how to edit. So, in that aspect, the industry became a little faster, and shoot days didn't take as long, and we can see exactly what we were shooting in real time. But it's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun. So, like, if you love what you do, then it's not doesn't feel like a long time.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I would say I want to say 20 years ago, Michael, you wrote, directed, and edited a short film called New York Minute. And what always fascinates me about the short films, Michael, is while they may seem like short, you got to make people, there has to be a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And you only got 4 minutes. I think it was like a 4 or 5 minute film. So you had to kind of put that all together in a matter of 4 minutes. Talk about the challenge of doing short films.
Well, with the short film, I knew I had to reel in the audience really quickly. And the way that I got the idea for the film was that I was shooting some news footage for NBC, and they were filming the Sammy Sosa parade when they won the World Series, and I couldn't believe that Giuliani was in a top-down convertible in the parade, and I was like, "Wow, are they still doing that?" And it got me thinking, how hard would it be to film this really interesting, scary story, and then also have it in real time? So I decided that I had a 4 minute limit, and it would be happening in real time, like this situation that this person had to get through.
Right. And Michael, like I said, 4 minutes is, again, it may not seem like a lot of work to people, but you really people have to buy into it. I mean, when you're watching a film, whether it's an hour and 30 minutes or it's 5 minutes, you have to, like I said, have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that's the challenging part of it. And I mean, it got great reviews. So clearly, you have a great imagination and you really know how to put stuff together. What is the part you enjoy the most? Do you enjoy the writing, directing, producing? Is there one particular one you like more than the other?
I like directing, but I've also become a really good producer. So I like the way the story comes together, and then I love working with actors. So if I can get a chance to direct the film, I love directing. But there's also a real rewarding side to producing, and then I ended up producing a lot of my friends' films because it's one thing to shoot a film, but it's another whole thing knowing how to put it together and knowing how to budget it and making all the magic happen.
Right. And I would think this, Michael, you did a film called Serial. And I think what was probably special about that for you is you were a producer and your brother directed it, your brother Kevin.
Yeah.
So being able to work with your brother Kevin, that had to be a highlight for you. And the other thing about it was you got hooked up with a guy by the name of Larry Strong, and he really brought your attention to the public. Like they really got to notice who you were as a writer, director, and producer. So that was like a big film for you in so many ways.
I mean, it's funny. Like, I didn't know that my brother was interested in filmmaking as well, and it was great working with him because he had this idea about what if you encounter a serial killer, but he had this idea that you would see all the different mediums through different cameras within the world. So, in that particular film, you see like footage from an ATM, footage from security cameras, and he tells the story about how the serial killer is stalking this woman, and it was a lot of firsts for us. So for me, it was helping him produce it. I had all the equipment, and I just let him run with it, and I had all the friends that did all the special effects for it. So it was really interesting. And then my brother, he was a acting agent at the time, so he knew um, what's her name, Velez, and she was a really well-known actress. She's been in New York Undercover and a couple of other television shows. So it was really interesting getting to work with such a seasoned actor as well.
Right. And Michael, I know a couple of filmmakers that you really kind of pattern yourself after. You love their work is Ridley Scott, and then of course there's Robert Rodriguez. Just talk about them a little bit, and what is it about them that really like you know hit a chord with you as far as directing and things like that?
Well, with Ridley Scott, it's the visuals, like the way that he tells a story. Like when you watch, a lot of people talk about his big films, but no one talks about like 1492. That was a really interesting film with Gerard Depardieu, and his visuals in that film really got to me, and I really liked his style. And then with Robert Rodriguez, I love the way he shoots everything like down and dirty, and he gets the work done really fast. So it might not be the best cinematography in the film, but he's definitely a storyteller, and I like the fact that he's able to do a lot of stuff with just a small crew.
Right. And Michael, although like you're a producer, director, writer, you've done some acting. I mean, you've been in some films and things like that. I mean, I could think of you had a small part in Rich Boy, Rich Girl. I think you played like a business person. Then, of course, you played a bouncer and reality sets in, things like that. But the other thing is too, you mentioned Star Trek. You did a few Star Trek films, one in I think 1993 or 94, and then a couple in the 2000s. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, that's really funny because my friend George Kane is a huge Star Trek fan, and he directed some episodes, and then he likes to make fan films. So he actually cast me as a Klingon, which I thought was really funny. And but it ended up being a well-liked character, so he kept bringing me back for more and more episodes. And he has a web series where he brings me as captain of another ship. So it's also very interesting to act in that. And with reality sets in, I was cast as a bouncer because I'm this big guy. So I end up getting typecast a lot in different movies as either the bouncer or the security guard, and it's fun to help out my friends when they're doing projects.
Right. So, Michael, let me ask you this: who are some of the people you've worked with? You know, I think about different people who were starting out like you were, and they've kind of done well. You know, are there any people in particular that when you were first getting into the business that really helped you along the way, or just, you know, were great friends of yours and were a great support system?
Well, it's really funny. When I was in college, I ended up going to school with people who are now famous, and it was really weird that all of a sudden, like I like I wish I was on the same level. Like they made a left and I made a right. So whereas I became really big in the independent world, they became really big in the film world. So like I went to school with Dina Meyer. She's in all the Starship Trooper movies and the Saw movies. I went to school with Ernie Hudson's sons. So his from his first marriage. So I went to school with Ernie Hudson and Rocky Hudson. So I stayed friends with them over the years, and I've worked with their dad, which is Ernie Hudson from Ghostbusters. And just recently, about 10 years ago, I ended up working with Sean Young, and she's become a friend. So it was very interesting working with her. I never thought in a million years that I would get to work with an actress that I idolized all throughout the 80s, watching Blade Runner and Wall Street and all those movies, and seeing her in it.
Right. So, Michael, let me ask you. I'll bring up directing first. So, you get a film, you know you're going to direct it. What is like the first thing as you're, in the early stages of putting this together? What are you trying to look for in the beginning? Like, what is like the first thing that you look for when you're ready to direct a film?
It has to be the story. So I go over the script, and if the story catches me, then I really want to start visualizing the scenes, and then I can get a feel for it, and I'll talk to the writer, and then we'll go about trying to come up with the visuals for the film. But that's the first thing that really hits me is the writing. So if the writing's not good, then the whole film will fall apart. But if the writing's good, you can always build from there.
Right. Now, let me ask you, Michael, you mentioned that you really like producing and things like that. How much do you enjoy writing? Because listen, we all know you could have great actors, great actresses, but if you don't have great writing, it's not going to work. I mean, do you enjoy the writing maybe more so than anything else?
I like to write. It's a process. I don't always follow the formula of what people use as far as writing a screenplay versus writing a book. I've written one book, and I've written a bunch of screenplays, and a lot of people struggle with the acts. So, like, you have to have a beginning, middle, and end, and act one, act two, and act three. And a lot of people will just write from their head. They'll have a great first act, but then they don't really know where the story's going. So they kind of flounder in act two, and then a lot of times you'll see a movie will flop because act three is awful. So you'll have a great beginning, but a bad ending. So it's always good to know when you are writing a story or writing a script, knowing the beginning, knowing the middle, and knowing the end, and knowing like those processes and how to do a proper script or a proper book.
Right. Michael, let me ask you this. If you were to do the dream film and have a dream cast, who would be like your main, let's just bring up four main cast people for this film that they're the main four. Who would be the four that you would love an opportunity to direct a movie with?
I'd love to do a movie with Christian Bale and Leonardo DiCaprio, and try to do some kind of a spy thriller or a police drama. Like, I always find those stories really interesting.
Right. And Michael, I'm just assuming this, I could be wrong, but to really make it in this business, you really have to be out in California to do this, right? Like on a consistent basis, because I mean, there's a lot of people that go to, they're in New York, they go back and forth, New York, California, New Jersey, Connecticut, things like that. But you really have to be in California to really make your mark in this business, correct?
Well, it depends. Like, I thought you had to be in California to be in the business, but I ended up being a solely New York guy, and I like New York. But my brother Kevin lives in LA, and he really loves California, and he's probably going to be there for the rest of his life. So it all depends on what part of the field you want to be in to work in this business. If you are in New York, it's a very small industry. Everybody knows everybody, so you don't step on any toes. In California, it's a little bit bigger, but it's a lot more corporate. So, if you could tell, like in New York, when you're doing a New York film, the actual city is part of your story. New York is actually a character in your story. Whereas if you're filming like in LA or on a soundstage, it's not so much as a character as the story.
Right. Michael, interestingly enough, we see this many times when somebody writes a great novel, it eventually makes it onto the big screen. I mean, it's happened countless and countless times, but you did something that was very unique. You took a screenplay and you turned it into a novel with this great novel called Gods. I mean, that was very like different, and I thought it was really cool because you kind of went the different approach where you wrote the screenplay first, then you turned it into a novel, which is very rare to happen. So just talk about what made you want to do that and like put it onto a novel as well.
Well, it's funny with Gods. I wrote it as a trilogy. I wrote the script. Everybody loved the script, and I wrote it like in the mid 2000s. But it was such an epic screenplay that I like no one was going to film it because you're looking at $100 million film. It has a lot of different effects and different locations. So it was a very big concept, a very big stylized script. But then someone said, a lot of books are being written into movies. And I said, well, if I can't actually film this movie, maybe people would like to read it as a book. So that's actually a lot harder because with scripts, you just have to worry about the setting and the dialogue. But with books, you have to actually explain the story to people and map it out so they can see it visually. So it was a lot harder than I thought because I had all this great dialogue, but actually telling the story and visualizing it for people to see it in their mind, I had to write it all out. And a lot of stuff that is done visually in film, you can just say, interior somebody's office or exterior the ballpark, and people kind of know, oh, okay, they're at a ballpark. But when you're writing a book, you have to say, it was a nice summer day and Bob was in the ballpark and the sun was setting. You really have to paint the picture for them.
Right. And I think what a lot of people didn't realize as well is you really didn't need a lot of money to do this. I mean, like people think that, but that wasn't the case. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think you had a GoFundMe page and you were able to kind of raise a lot of the funds through that, correct?
Yes, correct. Once I realized that I wanted to turn that script into a book, I realized that I can get a lot of work done through Fiverr and I can hire out a lot of the work. So it was just putting in the work to actually write the story and get it copywritten and get it edited the right way and putting the story onto pages. That was the hard part. But the actual physical of making of the book was just how to farm it out and how to get things done. And, it's amazing what you can do on the computer these days. So I decided to self-publish it because I wasn't going to wait around for a publisher to publish my book. I wanted to get it out as soon as possible, and I didn't realize there's all these programs and methods that you can use to self-publish your own book.
Right. And what I really think is cool is I think it's described as Indiana Jones meets Harry Potter. And it really like tells a great story. And I mean, you want people to kind of like imagine what life is like there. You're talking about dragons and fairies, gods and monsters, and trying to explain that they weren't exactly myths, that, there was something about them. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, it was funny. I always played around with the idea of, with history, like people talk about Stonehenge and they talk about dragons and the Middle Ages. I'm like, where do these ideas come from? I mean, are they completely made up or are they based on real things? So I started playing around with the idea that all these myths and stories were actually history that was forgotten. So I decided to write a story about that and try to explain, like, back in the old days, the dragons and fairies and elves were actually real. But it's been so long that we kind of forgot about it. So in the book, I have that all the creatures of myth actually live underneath the earth, and they've been warring with each other for centuries. And then because of a massive earthquake that happened on the earth, the two worlds are starting to merge together.
Right. And let me ask you, I mean, do you ever think about doing a sequel with that? I mean, it seems like to me that it's so creative that you could come up with even a couple, you know, acts to it, like, part two, a part three. I mean, has that been something that you've kind of flirted with doing?
Yes, I originally wrote the script as a trilogy, so I'm gonna try to write two more books to kind of tie up the story of gods. Um, I'm working on the second book now, just taking a lot longer than I thought it would because I want to make sure the story's perfect and people can really get into the story more than they did with the first book. With the first book, I think I wrote it, and people couldn't quite visualize all the aspects of what was going on. So I'm taking my time with the second book to really explain the secret war and all the myths and legends that are coming together into one story.
Right. Michael, and the type of work that you do, and so many people that do what you do, I often wonder if you are able to have that downtime where you're able to have that escape and do things for yourself, not just for your career and things like that. I mean, do you find it hard to fit your time in, or are you able to juggle both of them?
It's kind of hard, you have to make time. I have a family, so I have a wife and two girls, so I try to make time for them. But then you also have to make time for what you want to do with your career, because a lot of people end up just coasting through life and watching TV and kind of just not doing too much because they are tired. They're going to a 9 to 5 job, and they kind of get caught up in life. And next thing you know, you're like 80, and you're like, "What happened to my life?" So I realized that you have to make time to do certain things, and I realized that there might be only 8 hours in a day, but you have actually 24 hours, and you only have to sleep for 5 of those hours, so you can use the rest of those hours to do what you want. So you have to make time for your family and kids, obviously, but you also have to make time for your craft and hone it as best you can.
Right. So, Michael, let me ask you this. Is there like a particular story that you hope to do one day? Like, is there something that you have on the back burner that someday you hope to, whether it's a novel or a film, that you really want to do, something that you created? And I mean, is there that special project that you're looking forward to doing eventually?
Oh, definitely. I would love to bring in the story of gods and the other stories to the big screen. Because it's a very epic story. It would be in the realm of the Lord of the Rings. That's how big the story is. But I would love to see that on the screen, whether the film screen or streaming somewhere.
Right. So, what could fans that have followed your career and they've seen some of your work, what could we expect for 2025? What kind of projects do you have upcoming that we can look forward to?
Right now, I did a couple of acting gigs that you can see that I just finished filming. So um, hopefully, with the next couple of months, I worked with this producer named Lisa Black, and she invited me to do a cameo on her film. Um, it's uh, um, it's a very interesting story, but I can't really talk about it now. But when the
Yeah.
story comes out, I'll have to post some stuff about it.
And let me ask you, Michael, I don't want to get like the wrong actress, but is that the same one who used to go by Lisa Hartman? She acted a lot in the 80s, or is that a whole different person?
Whole different person. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So, no. But Michael, let me ask you, is there ever a thought to maybe be a writing coach or a directing coach, acting coach? Like, would you ever consider doing that? Because it seems like to me, you have a great idea of what you need to do to be successful. Would you ever consider doing that?
Oh, I definitely would consider teaching. I've taught some seminars in the past, and I've enjoyed working with high school students as well as college students. It's a lot different than when I went to school. They have a lot more opportunities and a lot more available resources to them. So if I could save them from making a mistake, um, I would love to just put them on the right path and have them do their projects, which would be a lot easier than when I went to school. But yeah, it's definitely something I would consider.
Right. So before we go, Michael, what would you say to the kid who's in school right now, who's inspiring to be a filmmaker or to, be an actor, whatever it might be? What message would you give to them if they want to, take this to the next level and be successful at it?
Well, it's funny. I've contemplated that question for a long time. When the pandemic came out, I realized I knew a lot of people in the film industry, but I never knew how they got their start. And I was a little bit envious because I know a lot of famous people, and I wondered, like, what's that magic thing that they had that I didn't have because I'm just an independent filmmaker. I'm not really in the Hollywood limelight, you know. So I wanted to know what their secret was, and I found out that if I could give advice to anybody trying to make it in industry, there's no set pattern or rules to doing something. Just do it. You know, like I only had video cameras when I was in the industry, and it was filming on videotape. But now that they have everything that's digital and you can edit on the computer, like there was no such thing as editing on a computer when I was in school. I mean, everything was linear editing. So we filmed from tape A to tape B to tape C, and we lost like a generation because, you know, when you're editing tape to tape, the footage starts to get a little muddy. So you can't do it for too many generations, or otherwise you used to get this muddy image. But nowadays everything is digital, and you can upload all your footage right into a computer. So you can you have your studio, you have your camera, you have your everything. Special effects can all be done on a laptop at home or on your phone. So I would just say, if you have this in your blood, just go ahead and do it and see what you can get done in your own, like the director Robert Rodriguez, and see what you can film. And it's more important to film stuff and get it done yourself than to go to school. I find that if you are thinking about going to film school, it's not really necessary. You could learn a lot from just other people in the industry. So I would just suggest that they would just go out and do it. Be hands
Right.
on.
That's a great answer. And Michael, I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes today. It was a real honor for me. And I really enjoy what you're doing. I think like you're as hard a worker as anybody out there, and you're putting great things together. And I just wish you the best of luck. I know you're going to continue to do terrific things throughout your career. And thank you for giving me a few minutes today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed our time together.
Me as well. And folks, there you have it. The one and only. He's a director, producer, writer. He's an author. He does it all. He's a credit to the business. The one and only Michael Arbouet. And folks, I encourage you all to check out his work because he really is a true talent and somebody that we all should try to inspire to be. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.
Thank you so much.